Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier and I am your host. The issue that women encounter on the job can run deeper than being unfairly assumed to be less competent or less valuable. Women are the victims in 80% of rapes and sexual assaults that take place in the workplace. The topic of sexual abuse, allegations, power, and reputations came under scrutiny when Harvey Weinstein was accused of sexual abuse in the entertainment community. Joining me today to discuss the difficult issues of sex abuse victimization and the judicial process is Tom Degonia, local attorney at Ethridge, Quinn, Ryan Wechsler, Deputy State's Attorney for Montgomery County, and Maria Navarro, Chief Academic Officer for Montgomery County Public Schools. So Maria, I know you're sitting at a table full of lawyers, but I wanted to ask you, what does Montgomery County Public Schools do to educate our young people that are facing these awful challenges in the future?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be sitting around the table with all lawyers. So in Montgomery County, we believe that starting early is pivotal. We have lessons that begin with both boys and girls understanding personal space, how to treat each other, how to know about themselves, how to advocate, how to find a trusted adult. And in this conversation specifically, we believe that education is pivotal for both young men and women. And we finished that trajectory of education and opportunities with what we call the Choose Respect or Respect Fest, which brings together more knowledge around how adolescents enter into relationships and have healthy relationships. And when that isn't the case, what do they do? Who can they call? And we think that that base education is pivotal for young people to learn how to get to know each other and have really great relationships, but that are not based in any kind of abuse or maltreatment.
Well, I think basically it all comes down to tools. The schools are giving us the tools to our young people to understand what is right, what is acceptable, and what's not. But Ryan, as a state's attorney and the deputy state's attorney in your office, you know, what are some of the difficulties you see when you're approached with regard victims in these kinds of cases? What are the challenges?
I think there's certainly different challenges that you face in every case, but a lot of times victims are very hesitant to come forward for a host of reasons. They're afraid of being attacked, they're afraid of being outed publicly, they're afraid of facing their accuser. And what most people don't know is that most victims don't disclose sexual abuse or assault immediately. Many times it's something where after a certain period of time goes by, for whatever reason, they feel comfortable coming forward. And at that point, kind of, we're looking at different challenges that go through, the criminal justice system, which is obviously most times we don't have overwhelming physical evidence. Like sometimes you would see on, TV shows that, where there's a hair pulled from a carpet.
I think the worst show that ever came out for us was CSI.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like my client was like, well, you can get the DNA in 24 hours. I'm like, no, that's not quite how that works. And why would there be DNA? There is no DNA in the case.
Right. And the problem is that's what jurors expect to see because that's what they see on TV. And most of the time that just doesn't exist for a bunch of reasons. First of all, some of it isn't physically possible, right. But also, as I said before, a lot of times we're dealing with delayed disclosures and whatever possibly could have existed doesn't. So it's a lot about educating the public, educating potential jurors in the community, educating police and other prosecutors, educating the bench and judges as to what these cases look like. And kind of, we talk a lot about counterintuitive behaviors that one wouldn't expect to see in potential victims. So everyone kind of has in their mind what they think a victim should be and should act like and how they should speak and present, and that's oftentimes not reality. So I think that really the most important thing is, even in our terms, is educating the community that we live in about these realities and what these cases look like.
You know, Tom, we had been talking earlier before the show, and you used a phrase that I really liked about, you know, the broad spectrum that this issue actually covers. It's not just rape. And what is rape? There's a, you know, a whole slew of behavior that is covered somewhat.
Well, and I think one of the things we're experiencing right now is somewhat of a cultural shift. And I think Dr. Navarro talked about it when she talked about how are we starting to educate people about, you know, respect and kind of having your own power. And what you see in criminal acts and what you see in the workplace, this is about power. It's about position and authority. And when you have someone who has been victimized, you know, we've all met rude people or crude people in the workplace. And really, should we, you know, legislate or should there be judicial action just because someone's rude to us? Probably not. But that's just the beginning point of that spectrum, which moves through judicial remedies to include creating a sexual harassment in the workplace or a hostile work environment, all the way up to and including sometimes, like you see in the Weinstein case, you know, full-on sexual assaults. But that's as a result of these cultures that are allowed to, you know, create a breeding ground for this type of behavior. And I think what, you know, Dr. Navarro is talking about is changing that culture so that people like Ryan Wechsler don't have to prosecute those cases, so that we're seeing and we're changing those attitudes sooner. But there is a wide spectrum of behaviors that lead up to and can culminate in that criminal activity.
And I think that sometimes having done criminal defense work, and you have the advantage of having done both, right? You get the perspective from the state's attorneys when you were a state attorney and then the defense attorney, is that there's many things that qualify as a sexual abuse or sex offense case that does not include rape. You know, the inappropriate touching and that sort of thing. And I think there's a lack of understanding that, you know, there's some behavior that will cross the line and be criminal, but then, like you said, there's some behavior that doesn't.
Right. Well, I think certainly when you start talking about people being physical, hands-on in any way, certainly that's a clear line that crosses over into the criminal realm, whether it's a misdemeanor assault or something more sexual in nature. What's more difficult to quantify is she made me feel uncomfortable. He made me feel uncomfortable. Well, what did they do? You know, was there physical activity? Were there words that were spoken? And I think those are things where education is really important, is you need to be able to say, no, that's not okay. I don't like what you're saying to me. But at the same time, those words or text messages or emails can become criminal behavior when they're unwanted and they're repeated and someone's stalking someone or harassing someone. So you can't just say words are not enough, because in some cases words are all you have to prove those criminal acts.
Dr.
Right.
Navarro talked about a little bit about the Choose Respect conference, and just to kind of tie that back into what Tom was saying, that the state's attorney's office works with Montgomery County schools and with the police and a bunch of different agencies to put on that conference every year. And a lot of it isn't just about, most of it isn't about, you know, a rape. It's about all sorts of different types of harassment or abuse or behavior, like emotional abuse, like economic abuse, different types of things, and not just from the perspective of the abuser or the victim, but also as the friend or the family member, and kind of just recognizing different behaviors before, hopefully, you're talking about something that gets to a criminal act. And that's a lot of what we try to work with students during kind of that process. And we also speak at different schools in Montgomery County about healthy teen dating choices and what that looks like. And on the alternative, what it looks like when there's a relationship that's not healthy. And as we go through that process, you know, we have all the time kids coming up and talking about, you know, what if I'm seeing this in my home? What if I'm seeing this at, you know, with my friend, and I know that I'm seeing something that doesn't seem right. So I think it's also, again, ties into early education about broadening what we're looking at and how to recognize signs that are concerning.
And I imagine that with social media, you know, we're talking about bad behavior. It doesn't have to be sexual. You've got the bullying, and I think some people just don't understand because they don't have the people right in front of them, the impact that social media abuse can be.
Well, for us, I think, the technology component brings a magnitude of complexities into a young person who is themselves developing, understanding and being responsible with technology. And we've spent a lot of time, and we have within the school system also implemented how do you, as a young person, learn how to use technology responsibly. Because sometimes even around you, a lot of adults may not be using technology responsibly. And what kinds of images get sent, what kind of conversations, bullying behavior, online bullying behavior. So all those things are part of the learning environment for young people to really understand how to navigate the reality of where we are today. I also wanted to point out, because we've talked a lot about the behaviors that happen for young people and students. They're in vulnerable positions. They're young people. So with the state attorney's office, we worked a lot also on developing training, required training that all of our staff have to do every single year for reporting, for understanding grooming behaviors, anything else. What is the process that they follow in MCPS to just report something that is not quite right? Because a lot of times it might just be indications of behavior patterns within how the student behaves that may trigger more of a concern about what's happening with them. And we are very committed to not just having kids learn about themselves and how to treat each other, but also the adults learn about how to be on the lookout to keep young people safe. And I think that's critically important.
That's great. And it's so important. And I think, everyone is agreeing that the sooner that they have this education and training and tools, the better they are going to identify the issue as it happens and maybe hopefully be able to report it, stop it,
And I think that for young people specifically, it's also empowering them with words, how to say things, how to describe things that may be happening. We have a very diverse community, and breaking sort of places where it might not be okay to speak up, or those cultural norms where that may not be the case. We want to have also conversations with our families to talk about this, that this is an important piece in having young people be able to express themselves in a healthy way. And so all that we take into consideration as we think about what kind of learning opportunities we want for both our students and our staff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, certainly early intervention, I think, is the answer, but many of the things you just described are the exact same things that went on in the Harvey Weinstein case, and we're talking about adults who didn't feel empowered to speak up, weren't in a position where they could say something, and that had most of those people were educated, accomplished people, and so that really speaks to the dynamic of someone who is a victim, who is unwilling to come forward or unable to sometimes come forward because they're in a position where they are financially dependent, their career is dependent upon it, and so they have lots of reasons, not to mention the emotional reasons they may not come forward. And that's a culture change that has to happen within businesses, within corporate America, as to say this isn't, it's okay to stand up and say something. And so in the workplace, unlike in the school system where you may have a teacher or a counselor or someone you could come to, it's important for companies to have a robust, human resources aspect so that someone can reach out and say, this is wrong. You need to be able to go to the supervisor and say, you can't do that. Likewise, in healthy teen dating, you want to give people the model so they can model what a healthy relationship looks like. In a corporate structure, you need to have someone at the top who models what a healthy corporate structure and corporate culture looks like. That is one of respect. If the boss does it and grabs somebody and that's okay, then the new person who just got hired is going to do the same thing.
Follow that example.
Right. You set a bad example, you're going to get bad results. You set a good example, you're going to get good results.
And I think part of it is that the corporate America, I don't think really understands the liability that is attached with that. I think just now they're starting to feel, that could really backfire on us.
Oh, I think that's certainly certainly the narrative of they're starting to understand that this is, it's going to hit the bottom line. They're not going to do it necessarily because it's the right thing to do morally. They're going to understand it because it's really affecting the bottom line of the companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the one thing that really struck me in the Harvey Weinstein kind of world of cases was the number, like the fact that it was such an open secret, that it wasn't just, something that was really behind closed doors and no one knew. It was everyone kind of knew. Everyone saw what was going on. There were so many people that were close to what was happening that had heard things or that had seen things. And the fact that that went on for so long and that there were so many victims over so many years who kind of, there was never a time when everyone kind of spoke out and said it wasn't okay. So I think that that's also really important, that a lot of times, and Tom was just kind of saying this as well, that it starts from the top, and a lot of times when there's a culture, it's not just the person who's being victimized that's scared to talk, it's everyone. It's everyone who's witnessing it and everyone who knows what's happening and isn't joining together to stand up and have a voice. So that's really important.
That was an incredible flex of power on his part to be able to make sure that that open secret was not made public and ruined careers of those who refused to participate. And we can't imagine the mental health impact that had to those that, submitted and their careers did not suffer because they were forced into, agreeing to it. And the fact that nobody stood up is just what I find so incredible, because you're always, I'm the Pollyanna, I kind of always hope someone will say, you can't do that, and stop them. But that went on for so many years, and who knows in what other areas, because that's just the entertainment,
Well, you look at the Michigan State Nassar scandal as well. Years and years of victimization. Well, what did I have to lose? Well, I'm not going to make the Olympic team. I'm not going to be at the top of my game. And he knows what he's doing. And he had convinced a lot of people, many of whom were in the same situation and knew what was going on, or at least had strong suspicions about what was going on, and didn't say anything. Or if they did say something, they were silenced.
And I think that the piece for those of us who are outside of the legal realm is sometimes watching right away what HR offices do as a result, companies or whatever institution it is, and then how long it takes, right? And so being part of the judicial process and the amount of time and agony that it takes folks to go through these cases and be witnesses and be called for. It's hard, I think, for folks who, most of us encountered the legal system very few times, and understanding all of the little things and details that you guys live every single day is very different, because for us it's the very first time, or one of the very few times that we would go through all these depositions and going back and forth within the courts and understanding that process. So it can feel very intimidating, even if you speak up, and what you can put yourself and your family through.
Well, and that's a huge disincentive for anyone to come forward. If they have a sense of what that process is like, they want no part of that process because they don't want to answer those questions. Not because it didn't happen, but because they know what it's going to put them and their family and their careers and their names and their reputations and everything through. But
it's always that feeling that the reputation of the accuser and of the accused is always damaged, because the victim feels, oh my God, everyone's going to think I'm lying, that I made it up, or that they're going to fire me, it's going to cost me my job, and how am I going to feed my kids or, pay my expenses. And the accuser is going to be, well, I didn't do it, and now all of a sudden I'm the bad guy, I'm the this and I'm that. And I have to admit, there are those who have been falsely accused, but, Harvey Weinstein, power flex was just, horrible to see something like that in an industry that has so many advocates for so many different issues, for animal rights, for the, for all kinds of different environment and this and that, and yet they didn't stand up to someone who is preying on the vulnerable.
And it's really easy to prey on the vulnerable. And it's also, you know, like you were saying, I mean, just the thought of having to go up against not just the person that already violated you, but also go up against the legal system and go talk about what you went through to, you know, countless numbers of people that you've never seen before, and to be attacked and to be questioned. And that's, you know, what we work with every day, and what we try to, you know, support victims and victims' families in kind of going forward with this process and saying that, you know, we believe you and we stand behind you, and trying to build a case around someone, and as much as we can protect them from being attacked, again, through the criminal justice system.
So from the state's attorney's office, I imagine you would tell, you know, those who are listening, if you were a victim, you know, and it happened and it's not a recent incident, you can still come forward.
There's no statute of limitations in Maryland for rape, certainly, and for sexual assaults. And we would always say, you know, you're not alone. And again, when victims find out that the fact that they did not disclose right away, that's the norm. That is not, you're not an outlier. And always feel like you can come forward and, you know, go to the police, and we will do our best to support you.
And Tom, what would you?
Well, you raised an important point when you're like all of these powerful people in entertainment. I mean, I think that's a great point, because there is no one profile, no one person who fits a demographic.
Yeah.
You may be wealthy, you may be impoverished, you may be well educated, you may be illiterate. This type of abuse, this type of sexual assault does not discriminate on anything. There is no basis of discrimination. It is an equal opportunity affliction. And I think that people should come forward, and there are great resources here. You know, Choose Respect and Respect Fest starts at the beginning. There's a wonderful resource. Ryan's office, the state's attorney's office, is a great resource. The Family Justice Center is a great resource for wraparound services. So there are, again, I want to come back to that spectrum. You know, it's not just if I report there's going to be a criminal prosecution. There are a lot of resources that are available to help you deal with that, to help you address it in the workplace, to help you address it in your family, or more importantly, if it's happening to someone who you know or love, to give them the resources to help get them through this to the other side. So every case doesn't end up in court or in a criminal prosecution. There are lots of resources, and I'd say come to the Family Justice Center. They can guide you to those resources.
And if you're not in Montgomery County, Maryland, I also know that there's a lot of hotlines that you can call, and I love the hotline idea, because if you don't want to tell anybody, they're basically having a conversation with someone on the phone who doesn't know you, won't require you to identify yourself, but you can at least, you know, talk to someone and get a good idea about what your options are and what you can do, and about identifying services and the like. So I think that's super important for everybody in the community to know. But in the last minute or so that we have, since the lawyers took up most of the time, Maria, what are the last few couple thoughts that you have for our audience?
Well, what I would say is be vigilant, be informed, be educated. I got an opportunity to visit the Family Justice Center, because sometimes our families, are not just our students, our families are displaced. If there is any kind of domestic violence happening at home. And what I would say is Montgomery County is blessed that they have a lot of supports in multiple languages. So if you need supports in various languages, the State Attorney's Office, Montgomery County Schools has it.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. I would like to thank our guests for joining me tonight, and the audience for watching, and invite all of you to join me next week at the same time. We can be seen on YouTube channel, YTT, and please check us out on Facebook and Instagram. I am Mariana Cordier. Until next time. And don't.